A silent city sleeps beneath a lake, its streets walked only by fish. This is not a myth, but the reality of places where nature has taken back control in ways we never saw coming. We are about to journey to 22 locations across the globe where the wild has staged a spectacular and unexpected comeback. You will discover the hidden mechanisms behind these astonishing transformations, from a radioactive city teeming with wildlife to a desert patiently burying its own diamond-fueled past. What does it take for a jungle to swallow a railway hole? And how can a single cracked roof lead to the complete collapse of a grand theater? These stories challenge everything we assume about the permanence of our civilization. By the end, you will see the delicate balance between human ambition and planetary power in a completely new light. What forgotten corner of the world near you might already be changing back into wilderness? The silent, watery embrace of Qiandao Lake offers one vision of reclamation, but nature's return is not always so gentle. Far from the still depths of China, an entirely different kind of takeover was unfolding on the other side of the world, a reclamation driven not by water but by roots and relentless green growth. This is the story of a railway that dared to cut through the heart of the Cambodian jungle, only to be consumed by it. In the late 19th century, French colonial authorities envisioned a direct train line from the capital, Phnom Penh, to a popular coastal resort town. They completed a significant portion of the track, battling the oppressive heat and dense vegetation. But their ambition was ultimately defeated by a combination of war, political instability, and the sheer, unstoppable force of the jungle itself. The line was abandoned and the forest wasted no time. Trees sprouted directly between the wooden sleepers, their roots twisting around the iron rails like serpents, slowly lifting the tracks from the ground. Vines shrouded the dormant locomotives, and the once proud path of industrial progress was broken and absorbed back into the earth. This is not a slow preservation but an aggressive reconquest, a powerful reminder that the jungle is always waiting, and it only requires a moment of human absence to begin its swift and total reclamation. The rusting rails of Cambodia were twisted by green force, but nature's reclamation can also bloom from profound silence. Pripyat, a city built for the workers of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, was once a vibrant Soviet model community. In April 1986, a catastrophic accident at the reactor forced the entire population to evacuate in under 48 hours. They left behind a city frozen in time, meals on tables and children's toys in yards, expecting to return in a few days. They never did. What was left was not merely an empty town, but a massive, unintended experiment. Scientists designated the area the Chernobyl exclusion zone, a place they assumed would be a barren wasteland for centuries due to persistent radiation. Instead, they witnessed something astonishing. In the utter absence of humans, wildlife surged back with breathtaking speed. Without the pressure of hunting, traffic, or industry, populations of wolves, lynx, and boar exploded. Przewalski's horses, an endangered species, were introduced and have since thrived. Trees have cracked through the concrete of main squares, their roots prying apart 5-story apartment blocks from the inside. Lush vines now shroud the stark geometry of a decaying Ferris wheel, a haunting symbol of a celebration that never was. This is not a slow creep but a rapid recolonization, proving that even in the face of humanity's most toxic mistakes, life finds a way to not just survive but to flourish. From this paradox of life in a poisoned land, we journey to a place where reclamation is not a matter of growth but of burial. The stark silence of the exclusion zone gives way to a different kind of emptiness, one not of radiation but of relentless, granular patience. In the vast Namib desert, the ghost town of Kolmanskop stands as a monument to fleeting fortune. Its story began with a single diamond found by a railway worker in the early 20th century. This discovery sparked a frantic rush, and a bustling German-style town erupted from the barren sands almost overnight. It boasted a grand ballroom, a hospital with the first X-ray machine in southern Africa, and even an ice factory, all sustained by the immense wealth pulled from the desert floor. But the diamonds were a finite treasure. By the 1950s, the mines were exhausted, and the promise of wealth evaporated. The last residents simply walked away, leaving their homes to the elements. The desert, which had been held at bay by daily effort and constant maintenance, began its slow and inexorable return. Without anyone to sweep it away, the sand started to flow. It did not attack with violence, but with a gentle, persistent insistence. Winds pushed dunes against the European-style houses, and soon fine, orange sand began to pour through every crack and crevice. It spilled through shattered windows, piled high against door frames, and eventually flooded entire rooms. Today, you can walk through buildings where the sand has risen like a silent tide, filling parlors and kitchens, creating soft, sculpted curves against the hard edges of abandoned furniture. The grand ballroom, once filled with music and laughter, is now a serene basin of perfectly smooth sand, lit by sunlight filtering through a broken roof. This is a reclamation not of growth, but of burial, a patient and beautiful erasure by the very substance that first brought people here. The wind is the sole architect now, constantly redesigning the interior of a forgotten town, reminding us that in the desert, human endeavors are merely temporary interruptions in an ancient, shifting landscape. The patient burial of Kolmanskop by sand is a slow, gentle erasure, but nature's reclamation can also be a living, breathing embrace. In the heart of Cambodia, the temples of Angkor Wat stand as monuments to a vanished empire, yet one temple tells a different story. Ta Prohm, a 12th century complex dedicated to a mother goddess, has been willingly surrendered to a different kind of creator. Here, the jungle is not an invader but an artist. The temple's massive sandstone blocks are held in the intricate grip of strangler figs and silk cotton trees. These trees begin their lives as tiny seeds, carried by birds and dropped into the high crevices of the ancient walls. From there, they send slender roots down toward the earth, a process that takes decades. Over centuries, these roots thicken into gargantuan, serpentine trunks that weave through doorways and archways, fusing with the stonework in an inseparable bond. The trees do not merely grow on the temple, they have become part of its structure, their roots acting as both scaffolding and demolition crew, simultaneously holding the crumbling walls together while slowly, inexorably prying them apart. This creates an impossible dilemma for conservators. Do they cut the trees to save the archaeology, an act that might cause the very stones they are trying to preserve to collapse? Or do they allow this stunning symbiosis to continue, accepting that the temple's ultimate fate is to be consumed by the beautiful, living artwork that nature has sculpted? Ta Prohm is a testament to a more delicate yet equally powerful form of takeover, one that is both destructive and creative. This intricate dance between stone and root shows a reclamation of patience and artistry, a stark contrast to the next location, where nature's return was not a slow embrace, but a single, catastrophic event. The artistic embrace of the jungle at Ta Prohm is a slow, deliberate partnership, but the next chapter in our journey reveals a reclamation born from sudden, irreversible fracture. The beachfront suburb of Varosha on the island of Cyprus was once the Mediterranean's most glamorous playground. In the 1960s and early 70s, Its golden sands were lined with luxury hotels and high-rise apartments, a jet-set destination frequented by Hollywood stars and European royalty. The streets bustled with sports cars and cafes, a symbol of modern prosperity. Then, in the summer of 1974, a military conflict on the island brought this vibrant life to an abrupt and chilling halt. The entire population of Varosha fled, believing they would return once the situation calmed. Instead, the area was immediately sealed behind a fence of barbed wire, placed under military control and frozen in time. For nearly 50 years, this ghost town has been left to the silent, patient work of the elements. Without maintenance, the concrete of the grand hotels has begun to crack under the relentless Mediterranean sun. Through these openings, nature has crept in. Trees now sprout from balconies, their roots snaking down the sides of buildings like green veins. Pavements have split open, allowing wild shrubs and flowers to colonize the streets, while wind-blown sand steadily buries the asphalt that once led to bustling nightclubs. The most profound transformation, however, happens on the beach itself. The shoreline, once packed with sun loungers and umbrellas, is now deserted, and in this new quiet, an ancient cycle has returned. Endangered sea turtles, which had long been driven away by the lights and noise, now crawl ashore under the cover of darkness to lay their eggs in the soft, undisturbed sand. Varosha stands as a profoundly poignant example of how human conflict can inadvertently create a sanctuary, a place where the clatter of civilization has been replaced by the whisper of the wind and the gentle rhythms of the natural world. This unexpected peace, born from tragedy, offers a stark contrast to the raw, elemental fury that reclaimed our next destination. While the beaches of Varosha found a quiet peace, the Caribbean island of Montserrat experienced a reclamation of pure, unbridled force. The capital city of Plymouth was once a bustling tropical hub, its streets alive with the rhythms of island life. But in July 1995, the long-dormant Soufriere Hills volcano roared back to life. A series of violent eruptions sent pyroclastic flows, superheated avalanches of gas and rock, racing down the mountainside. There was no time for a gradual departure. The city was evacuated under emergency orders, and within a few years, Plymouth was utterly transformed. It was not buried by sand or reclaimed by forest, but entombed under meters of gray volcanic ash and hardened mud. The city's buildings now stand as ghostly outlines, their upper floors barely visible above the solidified gray river that once was a street. It is a modern-day Pompeii, a stark monument to the planet's raw power. Yet, even in this seemingly sterile landscape, life has begun its stubborn return. Hardy pioneer plants like ferns and certain grasses have taken root in the nutrient-rich ash. They are the first colonizers in a process of ecological succession, slowly breaking down the volcanic rock and creating soil for more complex life to follow. This is nature hitting the ultimate reset button, using catastrophic destruction as the very foundation for a new beginning, a cycle of death and rebirth written in fire and ash. The volcanic ash of Montserrat represents a geological reset, but nature's reclamation can also unfold with a quiet, almost painterly beauty. On Shengshan Island, just off the coast of China, the fishing village of Houtouwan tells a story of departure not by disaster but by aspiration. In the early 1990s, as economic opportunities grew on the mainland, the entire community made a collective decision to leave their isolated homes in search of easier lives. They walked away from their small, concrete houses perched on the steep hillside, expecting perhaps to return for visits, but the village was left to the elements. What happened next was not a violent takeover, but a gentle, overwhelming embrace. In the humid, salty air, a blanket of ivy and other creeping plants began its silent work. The vines did not break the structures, they softened them. They crept over rooftops, spilling down walls like green waterfalls, and poured through empty window frames and doorways. Within a couple of decades, the entire village had been swallowed by a vibrant, living quilt. The sharp, angular lines of human construction were replaced by soft, rounded contours. Walking through the narrow, overgrown pathways today feels like stepping into a dream. Sunlight filters through a canopy of leaves, dappling the stone steps that now lead nowhere. It is an eerily beautiful scene, less a ruin and more a living sculpture, a place where nature has not so much destroyed a village as it has lovingly woven it into the landscape. This picturesque transformation offers a vision of reclamation that is peaceful and strangely enchanting, a stark contrast to the harsh, rusting landscapes we will encounter next. The lush green dream of Houtouwan shows nature's gentle touch, but its power can also manifest as a stunning paradox. In the waters of Homebush Bay, Australia, the SS Ayrfield presents a spectacle that defies easy categorization. This vessel was not a victim of war or disaster, but a workhorse. For decades, the steam collier hauled supplies along the Australian coast before being retired and towed to the bay to be scuttled, intended as a simple breakwater. Left to the elements, its metal hull should have slowly dissolved into a reddish-brown stain on the water. Instead, something far more beautiful happened. Mangrove seeds carried by tides and wind found a purchase in the rusting deck. The ship's holds, once filled with coal, now held something else entirely, soil and decayed matter that accumulated over time. From this unlikely foundation, a miniature forest erupted. Today, the SS Ayrfield is a floating island of life. A dense canopy of mangrove trees rises from its deck, their roots weaving through portholes and gripping the corroded steel. It is a jarring and beautiful sight, a perfect blend of industrial decay and vibrant biology. The ship is no longer a dead relic, but a living, breathing ecosystem, home to birds, fish, and crustaceans. This is nature's ultimate act of repurposing, taking one of our most imposing industrial creations and turning it into a nursery for new life. It proves that abandonment does not always mean an end, but can be the start of a completely unexpected and magnificent transformation where rust gives way to roots. The story of the Jungle Railway is not one of total defeat, but of a strange and fragile truce. On the outskirts of Battambang, the old French rail line, long since twisted and broken by the jungle, found a second life through sheer human necessity. After the brutal Khmer Rouge era, local people faced a problem. The roads were destroyed, but these mangled tracks still stretched across the landscape. Their solution was as ingenious as it was simple. They built what they called noris, small, lightweight trolleys made from little more than bamboo slats and old axles, powered by small gasoline engines. These makeshift vehicles could be lifted off the tracks in an instant, a crucial feature for a single track line. When two trolleys met, the drivers would simply confer, and the lighter loaded one would be quickly disassembled to let the other pass. It became a vital, if unpredictable, local transport system, a testament to resilience. This human reclamation of the corridor, however, is only skin deep. The jungle has conceded the rails themselves but presses in from all sides. A constant green wall of vegetation lines the path, a living tunnel that reminds every passenger of who is truly in charge. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers, and the sounds of the forest are never far away. It is a powerful illustration that nature's victory can be negotiated, but never fully undone. This constant, looming presence of a wild force, held at bay only by daily effort, echoes the story of a different kind of secret, one hidden not by leaves but by waves. An island of military secrets awaits, where nature's reclamation was not just tolerated but actively enlisted. A different kind of industrial ghost rises from the sea off the coast of Japan. Hashima Island, often called Gunkanjima or Battleship Island for its stark, fortified silhouette, was once the most densely populated place on Earth. For nearly a century, its underwater coal mines fueled Japan's industrial revolution, and a miniature city of concrete apartment blocks housed thousands of workers and their families. But when the mines closed in 1974, the island was evacuated in a matter of weeks. The company that owned it simply turned off the lights and left, abandoning the entire complex to the mercy of the Pacific Ocean. What has happened since is a masterclass in elemental decay. Without constant maintenance, the salt-laden air and the relentless pounding of typhoons have become powerful sculptors. They have chipped away at the concrete, exposing the rusting steel skeletons within. Rainwater seeps into every crack, freezing and expanding in the winter, slowly but surely breaking the buildings apart from the inside. Yet within this severe and crumbling landscape, life has found a way. Pigeons and seabirds nest in the empty window frames, their calls echoing through corridors that once rang with human voices. Hardy, wind-blown grasses and shrubs have taken root in the scant soil accumulated on balconies and rooftops, their green tendrils a stark contrast to the gray, decaying concrete. Hashima Island is not being swallowed by a jungle or buried by sand. Its reclamation is a slower, more patient process of being unmade by the very elements it was built to withstand. A gradual return to rubble that has inadvertently created a stark sanctuary for the hardy species that can survive its harsh environment. This slow-motion dissolution by wind and wave stands in stark contrast to our next location, where an entire city was reclaimed not over decades but in a single, terrifying night. The slow dissolution of Hashima Island by the sea shows a reclamation of neglect. But what happens when a body of water itself is the victim, and its return becomes a story of cautious hope? The story of the Aral Sea is one of the 20th century's most staggering ecological tragedies. Just decades ago, it was the fourth largest lake on the planet, a vast inland sea whose waters supported a thriving fishing industry and moderated the climate for entire regions of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. Then, in the 1960s, Soviet engineers embarked on a colossal project. They diverted the two great rivers that fed the sea, the Amu Darya and the Sadarya, to irrigate vast deserts for cotton farming. It was a triumph of human ambition over geography, but it came at a catastrophic cost. With its water supply cut off, the Aral Sea began to evaporate. Within 40 years, it had shrunk to a fraction of its former size, splitting into several small, hyper-saline pools. The former seabed became a toxic desert, a wasteland of salt and pesticide residue swept into deadly dust storms by the relentless wind. The fishing towns that once dotted the coastline were left stranded, their boats beached in the sand dozens of kilometers from any water, skeletal monuments to a lost world. This was a case where humanity did not merely abandon a place, we actively engineered its destruction. Yet, even here, nature has begun a fragile, unexpected comeback. In 2005, with international funding, Kazakhstan completed the Kokaral Dam, a simple structure that corralled the waters of the Sadarya River. The goal was modest: to save at least the northern portion of the sea. The results were swift and astonishing. Water levels in the northern Aral Sea began to rise, diluting the salinity. Fresh water flowed back into the ecosystem, and with it the fish returned. Species thought to be extinct in the area were rediscovered. a microclimate started to restore itself, bringing more rain and moderating temperatures. The dust storms that had plagued the region began to lessen. This is not a full recovery. The southern portion of the sea remains largely desiccated, but it is a powerful testament to nature's resilience. When given even a small opportunity, the natural world can begin to heal itself, offering a profound message that it is never too late to correct our course. This glimmer of hope, however, stands in stark relief against our next destination, a place where ambition was not corrected but utterly consumed. The vibrant decay of the SS Ayrfield is a spectacle of life, but some abandoned places evoke a future that never arrived. On the northern coast of Taiwan, the Sanzhi Pod City stands as a monument to broken dreams. Conceived in the late 1970s, this resort was meant to be a utopian vacation destination, its architecture ripped from the pages of science fiction. Rows of identical, colorful pod-shaped buildings, connected by sweeping walkways, were designed to offer a luxurious, futuristic escape, but the project was plagued by financial problems and a series of mysterious, fatal accidents during construction. A dark cloud of superstition fell over the site, and by the early 1980s, funding dried up completely. The developers simply walked away, leaving the futuristic pods empty and unfinished. What remains is a hauntingly beautiful ruin. The very elements that should have made it a paradise, the sea air and tropical climate, became its undoing. The salty breeze has relentlessly corroded the bright, synthetic finishes, leaving the pods stained and peeling. Torrential rains have seeped into every unsealed joint, and the relentless sun has faded the once vibrant colors to muted pastels. Through the cracks they created, tenacious plants have anchored themselves, their roots slowly widening the fissures in a silent, organic demolition. The effect is profoundly surreal. These UFO-like structures, symbols of a confident tomorrow, now sit silently on the coastline, being patiently unpicked by the forces of nature. It is a stark lesson that even our most forward-thinking designs are not immune to the patient, persistent reclamation of the past. This strange, colorful decay feels like a bridge between eras, leading us next to a ruin that is not modern at all, but ancient, where the earth itself has performed the final act of burial. Perched high on a crumbling cliff of southern Italy, the stone skeleton of Craco watches over the landscape it once dominated. This medieval hill town was not abandoned in a single, dramatic exodus, but in a slow, agonizing slide. For centuries, its strategic position offered protection, but that very foundation became its undoing. A landslide in 1963 was the first major crack in its existence, forcing many families to leave. Then, a devastating earthquake in 1980 sealed its fate, rendering the entire town unsafe for habitation. What remains is a ghostly labyrinth of empty streets and roofless houses, their stones bleached by the sun. Without people to maintain the terraces and drainage systems, the hill itself is dissolving. Each winter rain washes a little more soil from beneath the ancient foundations, and the wind patiently scours the stonework. Craco is not being swallowed by a jungle or buried by sand. It is being dismantled by gravity and time, a gradual geological unmaking that has turned a thriving community into a stark, beautiful ruin against the sky. This slow-motion collapse has an eerie grandeur that has attracted filmmakers for decades, making it a symbol of a timeless struggle. It shows that sometimes nature does not need to actively invade. It simply needs to wait for the ground to give way. From this slow surrender to gravity, we move to a place where nature's reclamation was swift, chaotic, and set against a backdrop of pure entertainment. The silence of Craco's slow collapse is broken by the distant echo of a ghostly carousel. In Nara, Japan, the skeletal remains of a dream rot quietly in the shadow of its inspiration. Nara Dreamland opened in 1961, a direct and deliberate homage to the original Disneyland in California. It featured its own version of Main Street, USA, a fairy tale castle, and even a Matterhorn-style roller coaster. For decades, it was a place of laughter and manufactured magic, a kingdom of childhood wonder. But as the real Disneyland expanded its global empire, the imitation began to lose its charm. Attendance dwindled, and the park's final ride came to a halt in 2006. The gates were locked, and the fantasy was left to the elements. What has happened since is a slow, surreal unraveling. The once vibrant paint on the spinning teacups has blistered and faded under the sun. The track of the roller coaster, a structure designed for speed and excitement, now stands frozen, its metal bones turning a deep, reddish brown. Moss creeps up the support beams, and ivy snakes along the queuing lines, patiently pulling the artificial landscape back into the earth. The most haunting transformation is in the details, a cartoon character's face, once beaming with joy, now obscured by a dark patina of mold. The silence is absolute, broken only by the wind whistling through the broken windows of empty gift shops. It feels less like a ruin and more like a memory being actively erased, a place where the forest is patiently digesting the very concept of joy. This poignant end for a palace of entertainment finds a strange parallel in a place that represented a different kind of modern promise, not of fantasy but of flawless convenience. A different kind of ghost watched over the city of Detroit for 30 years. Michigan Central Station was not a victim of war or natural disaster, but of a slow economic tide going out. When it opened in 1913, this Beaux Arts masterpiece was a gateway to the nation, its grand waiting room designed to inspire awe in every traveler. But as the automobile rose and railway travel declined, the station's purpose faded. The last train pulled away in 1988, and the immense building was left empty. Without the constant hum of human activity, a new kind of life began to stir inside. Pigeons became the primary tenants, their coos echoing through the cavernous hall where thousands once waited. Rain and snow found their way through the cracked skylights, pooling on the marble floors and creating a damp environment where seeds, carried by the wind or birds, could sprout. Saplings took root in the gutters and on the roof, their roots slowly probing for weaknesses in the stonework. Graffiti artists, in their own way, became agents of a new, raw form of expression, covering the ornate walls with vibrant, chaotic color. The station became a stark, beautiful, and tragic monument to a city's struggle, a place where nature and urban exploration moved in as humanity moved out. It stood as a powerful reminder that our grandest structures are not permanent, but are only sustained by our constant attention. Yet, the story of Michigan Central Station offers a twist, a potential counter-narrative to the others we have seen. After decades of decay, a massive restoration project is now underway, an attempt to breathe life back into the stone giant. This raises a profound question. Can a place truly be reclaimed by nature if humans have the will and resources to take it back? It is a story of a phoenix potentially rising from the ashes, a testament to resilience that stands in stark contrast to our next location, where the reclamation was not a temporary occupation, but a permanent surrender to the sea. 16 communities once stood where the St. Lawrence River now flows wide and deep. In the 1950s, an international project between Canada and the United States demanded a sacrifice for progress. To create the St. Lawrence Seaway, a vital shipping lane, the waters had to be raised. The solution was as simple as it was final. The villages in the path of the coming flood were purchased, their residents relocated, and every single building was demolished or moved. Then the dams were closed and the river was allowed to reclaim its expanded territory. What was left behind is not a ruin, but a memory held in water. On a calm, sunny day, when the light hits the surface just right, the past becomes visible. From a boat, you can peer down into the depths and see the ghostly grid of a world that no longer exists. The foundations of houses, the outlines of old roads, and the stone fences that once marked property lines now form an aquatic archaeology site. Fish dart through what was once someone's front garden, and the mast of a sailboat might pass directly over the spot where a schoolhouse stood. It is a peaceful, almost serene reclamation. There is no violent destruction here, only a quiet, complete submersion. The water did not break these places, it simply enveloped them, creating a permanent, liquid monument to the price of human ambition. This total aquatic takeover demonstrates that nature's reclamation can be as gentle as it is absolute, a seamless merging of history and habitat. The silent, submerged streets of the lost villages are a world away from the soaring vertical space of a Belgian cooling tower. This immense structure was once part of a coal-fired power plant, its sole function to vent vast clouds of steam into the atmosphere. When the plant was decommissioned, the machinery fell silent and the tower was abandoned. But its work was not finished. A section of the massive circular roof eventually gave way, and that single breach changed everything. Sunlight, once an enemy to the tower's dark, humid interior, now streamed through the opening like a spotlight. Rain followed, pooling on the concrete floor far below. With light and water now present, a transformation began that no engineer could have predicted. Seeds carried by the wind or dropped by birds found fertile ground in the accumulated soil. A forest began to grow inside the tower. Today, if you were to stand at the center of this colossal cylinder, you would be surrounded by a thriving ecosystem. Trees stretch their branches upward toward the distant, broken roof, their leaves filtering the sunlight that illuminates the moss-covered walls. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and vegetation, and the only sound is the whisper of the wind through the leaves, amplified by the incredible acoustics of the space. It feels less like a ruin and more like a natural cathedral, a place where industry has been humbled and reborn as a temple to life. This is not a reclamation from the side, but from within, proving that nature does not need to tear down our grandest structures. It can simply move in and redecorate, turning a monument to power into a sanctuary for peace. This vibrant indoor jungle demonstrates a swift botanical takeover, a stark contrast to a reclamation measured not in years, but in millennia, where the architect is not the sun, but the patient, unyielding work of crystals. The Belgian cooling tower became a vertical forest, but nature's reclamation can also be a patient, crystalline art. In the Italian town of Servia, an old salt works building stands abandoned, its industrial purpose long forgotten. Inside, a silent, glittering miracle has been unfolding. The air in the structure is thick with salt, a remnant of the mineral-rich environment it was built to process. Over the decades, this hypersaline atmosphere has worked its magic. Moisture in the air has slowly evaporated, leaving behind microscopic salt crystals on every available surface. One by one, these crystals have accumulated, growing into magnificent, sparkling formations that coat the walls, ceiling, and floor. Stalactites of pure salt now hang from the steel beams, while the windows are glazed with a thick, opaque crust. The functional interior has been utterly transformed into a cavern of white and gray crystals, a geode created not over millennia deep underground, but in a matter of decades inside a human-made shell. This is a takeover not by life, but by geology itself, a beautiful and sterile reclamation where the very substance the building was meant to handle has become its new architect and occupant. This crystalline embrace demonstrates that nature's return does not always require green growth. Sometimes it is a slow, inorganic metamorphosis, a reminder that the elements we extract can, in the end, reclaim the very spaces we built to contain them. From this glittering mineral tomb, we journey to a place where the opposite force, absolute dryness, performed a different kind of preservation. The silence of the salt-crusted walls gives way to the dry, whispering wind of the high desert. Bodie, California, does not present a spectacle of violent takeover or lush overgrowth. Instead, it is preserved in a state of arrested decay, a ghost town frozen not in ice, but in a moment of abandonment under a vast, relentless sky. This was no sleepy outpost. In its heyday, fueled by the discovery of gold, Bodie was a roaring frontier metropolis of nearly 10,000 people, a place of saloons, stamp mills, and a reputation for lawlessness. But when the gold veins ran dry, the lifeblood of the town drained away. People simply left, taking what they could carry and leaving behind a community in suspended animation. The arid climate at 8,400 feet became both its preserver and its gentle executioner. The dry air has staved off the rot that would have swiftly consumed the wooden buildings in a wetter environment, leaving over 100 structures standing. But nature's reclamation here is a matter of infinitesimally slow erosion. The wind, carrying fine, abrasive dust, patiently scours the paint from clapboard walls, leaving them bleached and brittle. The extreme temperature swings from scorching summer days to freezing nights cause the wood to expand and contract, creating hairline fractures that widen with each passing year. Windows, their glass long since shattered, frame only emptiness. A general store still holds rusting cans on its shelves, and a schoolhouse has desks where no child has sat for over a century. The reclamation is not one of occupation, but of patient weathering. It is the profound silence that truly dominates, a silence so complete you can hear the creak of a swaying sign, a sound that has echoed alone for generations. Bodie offers a lesson in slow-motion surrender, where nature does not conquer with force, but simply outlasts, using time itself as its primary tool. This gradual, dusty erasure stands in stark contrast to the dynamic, flowing reclamation that defines our next destination, where an entire village was not weathered but drowned. The cycle of flooding and drought that defines Villa Rinho-Dofurna reveals a different kind of haunting. While the lost villages of the St. Lawrence rest in permanent darkness, this Portuguese community stages a periodic resurrection. Nestled in a deep valley, Villa Rinho-Dofurna was home to a unique, almost tribal society for centuries, governed by its own ancient customs. But in the 1970s, the modern world demanded its sacrifice for hydroelectric power. A dam was built, and the valley was condemned to become a reservoir. The residents were forced to leave, their homes deliberately demolished before the waters rose. The lake that formed erased the village from the map, yet, unlike other submerged towns, this one refuses to stay forgotten. In years of severe drought, when the reservoir's water level plummets, the past literally resurfaces. The ghostly skeleton of the village emerges from the receding waters. The outlines of stone streets become visible, tracing paths that haven't felt a human footstep in decades. The foundations of houses, churches, and the old communal bread oven rise from the mud, a perfect, sorrowful map of a lost world. This cyclical reappearance is profoundly poignant. It is not a steady decay, but a recurring memory, a wound that opens and closes with the rains. For a few months, the village is a stark, muddy ruin under the sun, a direct and painful reminder of what was lost. Then the rains return, and the water slowly, gently, submerges it all over again, as if tucking the memory back into its watery bed. This intermittent visibility makes the reclamation feel conditional, a temporary surrender that is revisited with every dry season. It raises an unsettling question: is it more painful for a place to vanish forever, or to keep returning, only to be taken away again? This rhythm of appearance and disappearance, a dance between memory and oblivion, finds a strange parallel in our next location, where a structure did not sink, but was cut off, becoming a destination that is only accessible when nature itself permits. A bridge should connect 2 points, but this one leads only into the heart of the swamp. In the murky waters of Virginia's Great Dismal Swamp, an old railroad bridge stands as a monument to a failed shortcut. It was built to carry trains on a direct line through the vast, peat-rich wetland, a feat of engineering intended to conquer one of the East Coast's most formidable natural landscapes. The trains are long gone and the tracks have been removed, but the central steel span remains, suspended over the dark water. The swamp's reclamation was not an act of violent demolition. It was a quiet hydrological siege. Without constant maintenance to hold the water at bay, the swamp slowly flooded the earthen approaches on either end of the bridge. The land dissolved back into the mire, leaving the central section perfectly intact but utterly stranded. You can only reach it by boat, gliding through a corridor of cypress trees draped in Spanish moss. The bridge now serves no purpose for humanity, but it has been fully adopted by the swamp. Its steel girders are a perfect roost for ospreys and cormorants, and turtles sun themselves on the wooden supports. The structure has been stripped of its function, and yet has gained a new identity, not as a ruin, but as a permanent, integrated feature of the ecosystem. This is a different kind of victory for nature, one of assimilation rather than destruction. The swamp did not need to break the bridge, it simply made it irrelevant, absorbing our ambition into its own ancient, timeless rhythm. This peaceful integration sets the stage for our final, and perhaps most poignant, example of reclamation, one that unfolds not in a remote wilderness, but in the very heart of a modern city. But the swamp's quiet assimilation is a world away from the final, heartbreaking spectacle of our 22nd location. In the heart of Chicago, the Lawndale Theater stands as a monument to a vanished glamour. When it opened in the roaring 1920s, this was not just a cinema, it was a palace of dreams. Its grand auditorium was a symphony of opulence, with ornate plasterwork, velvet drapes, and a soaring ceiling designed to transport audiences to another world. For decades, it was a cornerstone of the community, a place of shared laughter and gasps of wonder. But time and changing tastes are relentless. The theater finally closed its doors in the early 2000s, and the grand space fell silent. The reclamation that followed was not a dramatic invasion, but a slow, internal collapse that began with a single, critical failure: the roof. A small breach, unnoticed or unfixed, became a gateway for the elements. Rainwater began its patient, dripping work. It seeped through the layers of the structure, finding every weakness. The water saturated the elaborate plaster ceilings, causing the heavy, decorative moldings to soften, then crumble, crashing down onto the empty rows of seats below. In the perpetual damp and darkness, new life took hold. Moss began to carpet the once elegant walls in a soft, green fuzz, and thick, black mold spread across the gilded balconies like a shadow. The grand stage, where stories once unfolded, is now framed by decaying velvet and the steady, melancholic drip of water. This is perhaps the most intimate form of reclamation, a decay from the inside out. It demonstrates that the collapse of our grandest creations often does not begin with a catastrophic blow, but with the failure of a single, seemingly minor component. The roof was the theater's shield, and without it, the very air and water it was built to exclude became the agents of its beautiful, sorrowful undoing. A single cracked roof can bring down a palace of dreams. and a tiny seed can split apart a fortress of stone. This is the unstoppable force of resilience, a pattern that weaves through every one of these 22 places. Nature's reclamation is never a single act, but a patient, multifaceted process. It adapts its strategy to the circumstances, proving itself to be the ultimate opportunist. In the radioactive silence of Pripyat, it was the sudden absence of human pressure that allowed wildlife to explode back into the streets. In the desert, it was the gentle, persistent patience of the wind and sand that buried Kolmanskop. For the jungle at Prohm, it was a slow, artistic fusion, a symbiosis of root and rock that creates an impossible dilemma. And for the volcano on Montserrat, it was a catastrophic reset, using pure elemental force to clear the slate for a new beginning. Each story, in its own way, challenges our deepest assumption, the idea that our creations are permanent. We build cities of steel and concrete, believing they will stand for centuries, yet these places reveal that our hold on the planet is far more tenuous than we like to admit. They are not ruins in the traditional sense, but living laboratories demonstrating the incredible resilience of the natural world. Life does not simply vanish when we leave, it adapts. It finds a way to thrive in the cracked pavement of a forgotten theater, on the rusting deck of a shipwreck, and even in the toxic shadow of a nuclear disaster. This resilience forces us to confront a humbling truth. Our civilizations are not separate from nature, they are temporary layers placed upon it. And when our attention shifts elsewhere, the underlying fabric of life begins to stitch itself back together, often in ways more beautiful and complex than we could ever have imagined. These ghost towns and sunken villages are not just monuments to our past, they are powerful premonitions of a possible future, a glimpse of what the world might look like long after the noise of humanity has faded away. The slow, internal collapse of a grand theater brings our journey to a close, but the pattern it reveals echoes across continents and centuries. These 22 places are not a collection of random tragedies, but a chorus singing the same humbling truth. Our most ambitious structures, our proudest cities, are temporary fixtures on a planet that operates on a timescale far beyond our own. Nature's return is not an act of vengeance, but a simple, persistent force, like the steady drip of water that eventually wears away stone. It is a cycle as old as the planet itself, a rhythm of growth, decay, and rebirth that our concrete and steel can only temporarily interrupt. These ghost towns and sunken villages are powerful monuments to this eternal cycle. They stand as silent reminders of the delicate balance we must strive to maintain with the natural world, a warning that if we build without respect for the forces around us, our greatest achievements may one day become nothing more than future habitats for the wild, beautiful, and unexpected sanctuaries born from our absence. If these stories of nature's stunning resilience have captivated you, we would love to hear your own. What forgotten corners of your world have you seen being quietly taken back? Share your discoveries in the comments below and subscribe for more journeys into the world's greatest mysteries.